Hello there, you're watching Dansky, the place to be to develop your creative skills. In this tutorial, we're going to learn how to create custom lettering in Adobe Photoshop. And we're going to be doing this with Mark Richardson. Now, Mark is a graphic designer from Brisbane, Australia, and specializes in hand lettering and custom typography. So Mark, thanks again for creating such an awesome tutorial. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this. It's the first tutorial collaboration of its kind here on the channel, and please do let me know your thoughts down in the comments. But without further ado, Mark, take it away.
What's up guys, my name's Mark Richardson. I'm a graphic designer and illustrator from Brisbane, Australia. And today I'm going to be creating a video for you showing you how I create custom hand lettering from start to finish. I'm going to be creating a custom script piece for Dansky as a thank you for inviting me to be on his channel for this video. So just to get a few things out of the way up front, I'm going to be working on a Wacom tablet in Photoshop, but it does not matter if you don't have one. If you just want to draw on paper with a pencil or a pen, it's going to be exactly the same thing. All the techniques I show you will transfer exactly the same. And the same goes if you're using a different kind of tablet like an iPad Pro, for example. Now we've got quite a lot to get through, so without rambling too much longer, I think let's just get straight into it. Okay, so to kick things off, when it comes to creating a custom lettering piece, I like to break it into two main components. There's the conceptualization or the concept phase, and then there's the execution and actually getting the fine details down and actually executing on the idea. So to start, we always start with the concept. Obviously I've already mentioned that I'm going to be drawing the word Dansky. You can draw whatever you like, but the first thing I do at the start of every project is just write down what I'm going to draw. So I'll just write down Dansky. And for those of you who are curious, I'm just using an A4 landscape document at the moment, and I'm just using a default brush that comes with Photoshop, which is called a 2B pencil, but you can use whatever you like. So the next thing we need to decide is the composition, so the sort of shape and structure that we want our lettering piece to have. So for example, if you were doing a quote or something that was 3 words, maybe they're the and then something else, you need to decide how you want to lay those words out. So if I use these as an example, let's just say this word is 3 letters long, this one is maybe 6, and this one is maybe 5. I want to think about, okay, so what if I stack the 3-letter word here, maybe the 6-letter word here, and maybe I can arc it or something, and then maybe I can put the 5-letter word there, things like that. No matter how good you are at executing lettering, if the composition doesn't work, it's going to look bad no matter what. So it's really important that you think this stage through. If you're new to lettering, I recommend just doing one word at a time like we're going to be doing today. But that's just more to tell you about how I process larger quotes and things like that. So I'm just going to delete that for now. Since we only have one word, it's fairly straightforward. So I need to have a think about exactly what sort of composition I want for this word. I could choose to, for example, just draw the word horizontally. I might like to put it on some kind of arch like that. I might like to do something in between, a bit of a curve to it, almost like a banner or a scroll, I guess, or something like that. I could just go simply diagonally like that. There's a lot of options that I can choose from. I think for this video, I'm going to choose this style on the left-hand side over here. So I'll just quickly get rid of everything that I've made and just redraw that real quick. All right, so when it comes to drawing hand lettering, you should always, always, always draw guidelines. I cannot stress that enough. No matter how experienced you are or how good you get at lettering, you should always have guidelines. The reason for that is simply if one of your letters is even slightly off, so for example, if I have an A here, and let's just say that I have a C, and the C is sitting up a little bit, and then the other letters are all in, it's gonna look off straight away. No matter how good you are at lettering, it's gonna look wrong, and by simply drawing in guidelines, it takes 2 seconds like that, you immediately avoid a lot of those issues, basically. The next thing is, when you're drawing your guidelines, I recommend that you also draw in a third guideline for the cap height. So if you're new to lettering, if we take a letter, for example, like the letter A, and then we take the letter B, if I draw a line underneath the letters here, this is what we'd call the baseline or the base height. And then if I draw another guideline here along the top of the A and B, this is what we'd call the X height. And then if I draw another line at the top here, this is what we could call a cap height, if you will. And then for other letters, such as the letter Y, for example, we come below the baseline. So we might call this one descender. So we use this fourth guideline to sort of line where our descenders will reach. And this ensures that everything stays nice and consistent, and yeah, it just helps to avoid a lot of common mistakes. So in this case, with my experience, I can usually get away with just doing the 2 guidelines. For this example, I will use 3. I highly encourage you to work with all 4 until you become really comfortable lettering. So I'm going to make a new layer now, just so I can draw over the top of this guideline without affecting it at all. The next thing I need to think about is how my letters are actually going to fit onto this canvas or onto these guidelines. And one thing that can be really frustrating is if you spend a lot of time drawing in your letters and you realize halfway through or towards the end that they don't quite align properly, or maybe I get up to here, let's say I'm at the S and I realize I've run out of space, so I need to readjust and rethink things. So to avoid that, what I like to do is just draw circles like this, just to outline where each letter is going to sit. So what I could do is say, okay, so I have a capital D at the start, I'll just quickly put in a circle where that might sit, and let's just say we have the A in here, the N here, S here, K up here, and the Y here. And now I can see that I've got pretty much exactly enough space to draw this word. Now obviously not every single letter has the same width. For example, an I is really narrow, a W is quite wide, but it's still really good to just give you kind of a general idea of where things are going to go. Okay, so one thing that you can also do with your guidelines is actually draw in some vertical guidelines as well, because this is another really sort of common mistake that a lot of people make with their lettering, is that if you follow a line like this, a letter B for example, you might be looking like this, then we'll get across to another letter somewhere and it might look a bit more like this. And so you can see here that we're quite vertical, and on the D over here we're quite sort of slanted, and it's a really sort of a dead giveaway that the lettering's not quite right. Something about it just visually looks off. So what we can do to avoid that is to simply draw in some more guidelines. So you might like to just draw in some diagonal lines like this all the way through. If you're working with paper, it's pretty handy to have a light box for this, or just use tracing paper or something. You could draw this underneath and then use tracing paper. And that way, whenever you're drawing a letter, for example, if I had the letter K up here, I can follow this guideline. I can follow this guideline when I'm drawing the K and make sure, that it is in fact vertically aligned correctly. Okay, so now that we've got our guidelines and our little placeholders, set up and ready to go, we can start actually drawing some letters. So I'm going to use these guidelines and these bubbles here to kind of give me a rough idea of where my letters are going to sit, and I don't want you to think at all about these being fancy or adding any flourishes or ligatures or any fancy details. We just want to get some basic letter forms down on our paper or on our guides like this. So I've got a new layer here, and I'm just going to really roughly just kind of sketch in. Okay, I've made this circle here for the letter D. I'm just going to sketch that in really rough. I've got the A here, got an N there, got a line for the S. K's there. Remember to keep close and within your guide. So when I'm looking at this now, I'm sitting nicely with these vertical guides here. They need to be right up against the horizontal guides as well. And last but not least, I can of course draw in the Y. Okay, so we have our basic letter forms in place, which is great. For anyone wondering about that S, if you aren't quite familiar with drawing cursive S like that, instead of doing an S like this, I simply draw a vertical or slanted line like this, and then come down and do a little circle on it, a little half circle like that, and that's how you create the S. Okay, so now that I've made some progress, I'm going to actually hide these guidelines here just so I can see my lettering a little bit easier. Now we just want to assess how things are sitting. Have I given myself enough space? Are some letters too cramped? Are some too big, too small? Stuff like that. So straight away I see a massive gap between the D and the A, so I'm actually just gonna move the D over a tad. Looking at this now, I feel that the spacing's pretty good between the A and the N. The S feels a little bit squished to me, so whether that means I need to move it out and then maybe just adjust the K and the Y a little bit further out. I think that looks a bit better. And yeah, I think overall it's looking pretty solid. Remember my letters should be consistent vertically like that as well, which they look pretty all right to me. So that's great. If you're looking at your lettering and you can't quite figure out where any issues might be, you feel like something's off but you can't quite put your finger on it, try using the rotate tool, which is R on the keyboard, and just flipping it upside down, or just turn your piece of paper upside down. And by doing this, visually you can't really recognize the letters, and instead you just see the shapes and the spaces. So by doing this, I've immediately reminded myself that my Y isn't up to the guidelines over here, which I didn't quite notice before, and things like that. So again, I'm seeing a bit of space here and some other little things like that. So it's really handy to just flip it. You can also invert the colors if you're using Photoshop. Make the design white on black, and it'll sort of trick your eyes, and you'll start to see things a little bit more clearly as well. So another cool tip there. Okay, so now I've got my basic letters in here. I'm fairly happy with the spacing. I probably will end up changing the letter D a little bit more, probably make it a bit bigger or something like that. I'm not quite sure yet, but I'm gonna just duplicate this now. So in Photoshop, I'm just gonna drag this layer down and duplicate it. Bring it down here. If you're using pencil and paper, I recommend you just trace where you're up to, so you have a spare copy of the design handy at any time. And now we wanna think about what we can do with these letters before we commit too much time. We want to know where this project's going, right? Because if you're doing this for a client, you don't want to spend too many hours on something if it's not going to work. You want to get to that point as soon as you can, and get onto the right idea. So I'm thinking now about additional things that I can do with my lettering. Now visually, when I've got something like this, I have some visual spacing here that I think can be fixed and filled in. So by looking at this, I can see that there's a bit of a gap in this area here. There's also a bit of a gap sort of up here too. So a bit of white space there. So if you imagine if this was for, say, a rectangular name badge or something, we would want to try and use some of that space. We don't want it to just sort of sit there empty. It looks a bit awkward that way. If you had chosen to draw your design on a curve or an arc, for example, something like this, and you had your letters just in here, you might find that this space looks like it needs filling, or maybe some of these spaces here as well. So this is kind of the part now where things get pretty exciting. We start to think about changes we can make to letter forms, flourishes, ligatures, swashes, all these fancy things that we can do to fill some space and really take the lettering to the next level. So essentially, when it comes to a space like this, you can use just about any letter to fill the space, which is awesome. You could use any one of these letters to fill this space down beneath. So again, I'll just make another layer now just so I can quickly show you these spaces again. So I've got a bit of a awkward space here and here. And I can use any one of my letters to, create a flourish or something to fill that space. So generally, the easiest letter is the one on the end. Right now, we've got a Y, which is kind of really easy. It kind of makes life really good for us because there's a lot we can do with a Y to make it look more interesting. So if I draw another Y over here real quick, we just have this standard looking Y. What else can we do with it? Well, we could draw it and put a little loop on it. Maybe we could extend that up to the top here as well. We do have a little bit of visual space here next to the K, so we could do that and use it to fill that space. We could also draw a Y and then loop it all the way around, and that would help to fill this space here, so that could work quite well. We could even loop all the way around like that and do something else, so there's a lot of possibilities, and I really encourage you to just experiment with the different letter forms and what you can do with them. I know that right now, this is just one video, so I don't have too long. I can't ramble for hours and hours, but there's so many possibilities that we can go through for each letter, so really think about that. On another example, we have the letter K sitting here. So what can we do with the letter K? Well, we could extend that like that. That doesn't really help us in this example because it would go over here. We don't really need to fill that space. Maybe we could do a loop like that, and that could help to fill some of this space here. So something like that could be cool. What's also interesting is that we could use the K to fill some of this top space, which is cool. So we could maybe put a loop here and loop off and fill some of this gap there. So Like I said, there's so many possibilities, way too many for me to go through in this one quick video. I really don't want this video to take too long for you guys. I know that you just want to learn as much as you can. So now let's talk about another quick example here. We have the N in the middle, which is another really nice one because it finishes down the bottom, and we could easily just do a loop or something like that. So I'm going to quickly grab my lettering over here now and just rough through a few more examples like that, and you guys can see some of the process. Okay, so now I've spent the last 2 or 3 minutes just doing some really rough sketches and letting my creativity just take me wherever it wants, I guess, and seeing what kind of changes I can make to these letter forms. At this point, I think we just decide what the strongest concept is, which one we like the most, and then start really focusing in, and now we get to start really refining that one concept. So for me personally, it's the first one, the top left up here. I really like that Y especially, and I haven't really done many ligatures or swashes, flourishes really with an N like that before, so I want to work on that. I want to see what I can do with it. So I think now I'll just grab this concept by itself. I've just grabbed a normal default brush now with the flow dropped a little bit and pressure sensitivity enabled. And at this point, I'm going to grab another layer and start tracing things and just really start refining it and getting it to look like a final lettered design ready for a client. Alrighty guys, so once my design is done and not looking too shabby, what I like to do is turn this into a vector. So I already have a couple of videos on my channel about this process, but I'm going to use something called image trace. So I'm going to just copy it across and paste it into Adobe Illustrator, use my favorite settings for image trace, hit trace, and now what's really cool is I have a fully vectored hand lettered design. And one of the really cool things about doing some of the final work in Illustrator like this is I can really zoom in now and select some of these individual anchor points and get my curves looking as nice as I want. If I wanted this to be absolutely perfect, I would probably just redraw it with the pencil, but again, that's probably something for another video because it's quite a long process to learn. So there you have it guys, that is a glimpse at what my process looks like when I'm doing hand lettering for clients. Again, I apologize if there's anything that maybe I went over a little bit too quickly or didn't quite give enough detail about. It really is quite a detailed process to explain in one short video. So I really have just tried to cover as much as I can and really just give you all the most important stuff that you need to learn to do lettering. So if you guys have any questions, by all means ask away in the comments or tag me or ask on my channel or send me a message, whatever works for you. And again, I'd like to say thank you to Dansky. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on the channel, mate. Really, really appreciate it. I hope you guys liked the process. I hope you liked the design. And yeah, I will hopefully talk to you guys soon.
And there we go. That's how to create custom lettering in Adobe Photoshop. So Mark, thanks again for such an awesome tutorial. Guys, if you'd like to check out more of Mark's content, there is a link up here and in the video description. And please feel free to leave any questions or comments down below. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Take care, and I'll see you next time.